It's time to celebrate Epiphone's 150th anniversary. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. That's right, the Epiphone Company was first founded in the year 1873, so that makes the year 2023 their 150th anniversary. Another date that might be pertinent to know is 1957. That's when Gibson purchased Epiphone, and that's about the time when some of these new anniversary models came out. But before we get too deep into that, let's take a look at the one that we're reviewing today. But first, let's start with the case, because this one actually comes with it. They have a nice little anniversary banner right here that tells you those years we were just talking about, 1873 through 2023. So far, it looks very similar to the USA Epiphone cases that they've been using. But this one's not made in USA, but it is one of their Sheratons. So this is a very unique version of this guitar. This model was first introduced in the year 1958 and went through a few different spec changes as the years went on. So this one's spec'd out with kind of a cool Bigsby-like vibrato, but it's Epiphone branded. Has a real wooden block on it. Feels pretty good. And then we've got the mini humbuckers. That just makes this thing very unique. Fun fact, Epiphones are actually where the mini humbuckers first debuted, and then they later used them on Gibson-produced things. So it's pretty common to see online that there was inherited technology, but it was actually Seth Lover who also designed them. So that's something that I'd recently learned. But we've got a pretty cool fancy floral headstock here. Then we've got these cool block inlays with the V pattern that we'll talk about a little bit more on the workbench. It looks like we got that cool logo on the backside of the headstock as well. So first impressions, honestly, this thing is very unique. It doesn't feel like it's trying to be a cheaper version of anything else. It's just what it's meant to be, an early version of the Sheraton. It's got a good weight to it, not overly chunky, but not too light. But now let's talk about the other models in the 150th Epiphone series. They brought back the Wilshire, the Sheraton, the Zephyr Deluxe, Regent, and the Crestwood Custom. So the Crestwood Custom and the Wilshire, they look relatively similar. It's $899 and $999, so only a $100 difference. They're kind of like a Gibson special, but yet they've got the cool batwing headstock, and one of them is just a little bit fancier than the others, and the colors are a bit different. But the Zephyr is more like maybe a Gibson L5-ish guitar. It's a little bit bigger of a body, and honestly, it's pretty cool in its own right, but that one costs $1,299, the exact same price point of the Sheraton. So needless to say, these are not the cheapest Epiphones out there. They're one of their higher end ones. So I'm curious, is it worth it? Because a lot of people were kind of sticker shocked at that at first. But I mean, you get the case. It's looking okay so far. But let's do a deep dive of its parts and specs and hear it in a playing sample before drawing our final conclusions. So if you'd like to check one of these out on the show with me via my new Guitar Day program, feel free to send me a message via my website, because that's why we're looking at this one today. Thank you, Brian, for doing the new Guitar Day purchase, so we can all check out your new guitar. Inside the Epiphone Sheraton, I was shocked when I took these pickups out. I didn't read the spec sheets close enough. The price totally makes sense now. They've got Gibson pickups in here. They're just regular mini humbuckers from the Les Paul Deluxe, so Rhythm LP Deluxe in the neck. But what's with that date, 1/22/15? Then our bridge is 1/23/15. At first I was thinking maybe they stickered these in China and they have like a different year-day writing system, but no, that doesn't make any sense. Must be some old inventory that they had over there in China that they were looking to use up. I don't know. But I actually recorded the playing segments for this next batch of reviews before I took them apart because one of them had a Floyd Rose. So later in the demo, I'm going to be a little bit confused. I thought these were just like brand new Epiphone mini humbuckers. But spoiler alert, these things sound phenomenal in this guitar. You're in for a real treat. And I'm not normally the biggest fan of mini humbuckers. The rings are pretty unique on these. They have a beveled edge, instead of what you normally see on Gibson-style mini humbuckers that are more of a rounded surround. I'm not quite sure what's going on with the gold plating, because that's what it looks like after you've wiped it off. The same is true for our bridge pickup, but it's not always noticeable at all angles. Within the circuit, these read 6.1 k ohms in the bridge, 5.99 in the neck, in the middle position for fun, 3.01. That's interesting. It's almost like these are underwound mini humbuckers. And knowing what I know now, maybe that's why they sound so good. But as far as our neck pickup cavity, you can see the 150th anniversary model over here and your serial number. And peeling the sticker up a tad, you can see the tenon construction here being long neck. Here's our bridge pickup cavity. You can see your layers of maple that create the top that is form pressed. Then we've got a maple center block on the inside. Next up, we can look at our bridge. It's just your standard Epiphone one, branded as such.
Now let's take a look at this trem system. It's a little bit unique. So the bridge has 6 slots that the strings go through and then the ball ends secure to. Then the design's pretty cool because it's just a cylinder there that you wrap your string around and then you're all set. So it's a lot easier to restring than a Bigsby. But it utilizes 5 screws. So there's one big one right here that secures the whole thing to the top of the guitar. And then just like some of the Gibson vibrolas, it looks like there's 4 screws underneath here that it secures to the top with. So it's not like a Bigsby that has holes down here. So if you actually wanted to remove this whole thing from your guitar, there appears to be a little set screw right here that would remove this wooden plate that you could then remove that if you wanted to install a stop bar or something and then not worry about that. Because you could. This does have that center block that we were just seeing. After that, the arm construction is just like any other trem system. It utilizes a spring, compresses, and that moves the block that the strings are in. And our bar has 3 different locations that you can set it to depending on how long you want it to be. But if you own one of these, here's a pro tip. This is actually Indian laurel, the same thing that they are using on your fretboard. So if you buy one of these and you're not really happy with the way the wood looks, just condition it. Look at it when I unboxed it, and look at it now. It definitely darkened up in color. This is just raw wood. It does need conditioned. As far as your controls, regular stuff. Independent volumes and tones for each pickup, output jack located on the front, and a 3-way toggle switch right here. Here's what our pickguard looks like. We've got the big fancy Epiphone E right here. You've got it there. Got the branding on the headstock. This is one of those proud Epiphone models. But your pickguard has multiply binding and actually appears to be traditionally constructed. Although what's interesting is the multiply doesn't actually continue on to the back. You can see right where it stops there. So I wonder if that's how they save money. Instead of actually individually layering it, they actually just have this pre-made that just kind of fits onto the guard. I'm not entirely sure, but the pickguard is semi-transparent. But this example just has some pretty nice wood grain to it. I'm pretty happy with the wood grain lottery on this purchase. It's subtle and not in your face, but something to be proud of. I also got multiply binding up here on the top. As far as fit and finish, yeah, you get a little bit of a lacquer buildup over here with the red onto the binding. Same thing is true over here. There's also a very slight dip in the finish right here if you're really looking for it. And inside the bass side F-hole, we have the model E212TV Sheraton with our serial number, with our guarantee. Moving on from our mostly maple body, we've got the mahogany neck with the Indian laurel fretboard. That's pretty much the only spec you could look down upon. The higher spec wood choice in this case would have been rosewood, but they just don't use it in Epiphone's lineup too often anymore. And honestly, Indian laurel fretboards are starting to feel better to me. I don't know if they're doing something different than they were about 5 to 10 years ago, but this one has some nice grain characteristic. And even our tailpiece block, nice and straight grain. However, when I saw the spec sheet call this mother of pearl with abalone inlays, I thought, there's no way. Epiphone rarely does that. I was ready to call them out for lying, but no. That actually is the real deal stuff. If you're not familiar with what I'm saying here, the whitish material right here is mother of pearl, whereas the one that has a lot more color to it is abalone. So you've got a triangle shaped abalone figure, and then the rest of your block inlay is just mother of pearl. It moves beautifully in the light, so that is definitely a little bit more of an added cost, and you're going to notice you've got additional layers of binding on the inside of the fretboard. That just makes this thing ultra fancy. As far as QC, at first glance, everything looks okay, but you can see right here at the 3rd fret, something happened where the fretboard dipped a little bit, and you can see some tooling marks in that area that caused that. Otherwise, relatively minor marks. Nothing too crazy. But it's a 24 3/4 inch scale length with a 12-inch fretboard radius. But we have a 1.7-inch nut width that increases to 2.09 by the 12th. First fret neck depth of 0.85. That stays pretty thin at 0.88 by the 12th. Here it is on the contour gauge, 1st fret and 12th fret. So you gotta like those skinny C necks if you want to party with one of these. Moving on to the face of the headstock, we've got the Tree of Life inlay style as well as our Epiphone logo, and it looks like we're rocking 3-ply binding. With Grover tuners, here's what our truss rod looks like underneath our blank cover. But now let's break out the endoscope to see what we see. Bass side F-hole first. Alright, we've got our typical curved edges, except for right by where the neck joins into the body right here. And it looks like we do have some sort of a spruce bracing, or maybe even maple on this one, I'm not sure. But the construction's looking pretty good right here. And here's something else about these. They use CTS pots with orange drop capacitors, just like the Gibson USA's. So that looks like that all checks out. And the construction's pretty much the same over here. Moving on to the back, nothing too exciting here. You can see some very light flame figuring within our back maple piece, so that's a little bit unique on this one. That's not a spec, that's just kind of luck at the draw. And we've got 4-ply binding back here, with our strap buttons at the bottom and right here at the base of the heel. And even the mahogany on this neck has a little bit of dancing candy cane figuring. But here's another premium spec of these that I did not realize. It is a one-piece mahogany neck. Most Epiphones have some sort of a scarf joint, either right here or like right there. But they had all the China stickers on here, so I removed that so we could visually see that yes indeed, that is a correct spec for these. So now that I've torn it apart and understand it better, I get the price tag. We've got our inspected by decal back here, and straight up Grover tuners. But all said and done, this one weighs 9 pounds 2 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds.
So far, I'm really digging the tones out of this thing. In the past, I've had some Les Paul Deluxe, and sometimes the mini humbuckers are just overly bright. They've really nailed the tone to being bright and articulate, but not really in your face. Love how full that neck pickup is. Let's test our vibrato now. Let's abuse it. Didn't lose tuning too much. Any pull-up movement? Wow, that's actually surprising. Now, if you're pulling up, you gotta be careful that you don't accidentally lose your spring, but you actually have a surprising amount of upward motion. All right, let's go ahead and try some dirt. refreshing. It actually sounds pretty good distorted, even drop tuned. I didn't get any feedback at all. Sometimes I do on these semi-hollows in this small room. So if you're worried about that, I mean, in my case, I'm not getting anything. Even if you let it ring a bit. I suppose what's probably helping that, though, is you have all this right here that doesn't have any type of a tension bar like you normally have on a Bigsby. So these things just ring out. Now, if that bugs you, you could always put like a string mute over top of that, but I think it just adds to the musicality. But honestly, just playing this thing unplugged, I really like the tones. That's very mellow. But you really hear the vibration of the strings. So if that bugs you playing acoustically and you do that a lot, maybe pass on this one or get that mute. Now that we know all about the new Epiphone Sheraton 150th anniversary, what are my final thoughts on this one? Honestly, I've got to say, I'm very pleasantly surprised by this thing. I thought I wasn't really going to love the tones, but you know, it's a period piece. It's kind of cool in a reissue sense, but no. I actually highly suggest these pickups. They sound phenomenal. They're familiar but different at the same time. This is a very nice cherry red. We won the wood grain lottery a little bit with having some nice plain grain underneath it. And the tremolo, honestly, it's pretty good and it looks fancy. And we lucked out with the fancy mother of pearl inlays. It's not a lie in the spec sheet. So I would suggest checking one of these out. So would it be my first choice for $1,300? Probably not, but it is a solid choice if this is what you're looking for. Now that I understand that it's a premium Epiphone, it's got the USA electronics and pickups, it's got the one-piece neck, it's got me really curious to try the other ones out. So if anybody wants to new guitar day any of those other three, I'm totally down for it. So let's make it happen. But honestly, after playing it, I could see why somebody would take one of these things home. It is a very nice surprise for what it is. So Troglodytes, I hope you found this review helpful if you were trying to decide whether you should get one of these or not. And if nothing else, you enjoy your new knowledge of this model. All right, Troglodytes, we'll catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.